Hey you, get back to work or you'll spend the night in the burner, the security guard threatened abruptly, interrupting the thoughts of a man named Harrison Saunders. Harry had sat down for a few seconds to take a much-needed break on that hot summer day, but, wiping away streams of sweat on his forehead and neck, he reluctantly resumed his work. The labor of sorting through garbage every day for the last 5 years had done a number on Harry. The man was of middle age, with dark hair made oily by constant sweaty work and few showers. He wore a long-sleeved sackcloth shirt with long, heavy pants, each ripped and ragged and covered in various stains. He was as gaunt as a needle, and his hands had become calloused and chapped. His eyes, once a deep, handsome brown, had turned nearly gray with despair, because he had lost the thing that was most important to him. Once, 5 years before, Harry had a reasonably good life. Taking care of his daughter was his only felt purpose in life. He worked for the richest family in the land, the Middletons. Everyone obeyed them as if they were royalty, although Harry was pretty sure they had no royal blood. The Middletons lived in a tremendous castle of cracked gray stone, with soft green moss creeping from the cracks. Harry loved working in the magnificent castle, and the job had pretty good pay. Over the years, however, Harry made a few mistakes and became known for his lying, but he worked hard enough to keep the Middletons pleased. Estelle Middleton was like the princess of the castle. Estelle was genteel, her skin was fair, and she had curious blue eyes and rosy pink cheeks. Her parents loved her dearly and did just about anything she wanted them to. One unfortunate day, someone stole Estelle's most prized possession, a delicate bracelet engraved with flowers that had diamonds embedded in it. The stunning piece of jewelry was an heirloom that had been in her family for many generations. When it was stolen, Estelle claimed to have seen Harry observing the bracelet suspiciously. Since Harry was known for his lying, the Middleton family was not convinced when he honestly explained he did not steal it. As a punishment, Harry was sent to work in the castle's junkyard. Even next to such a large castle, the junkyard was so much larger than it seemed it should have been. Either way, it was horrible having to work there, and there was no way out. Harry would work there until he died, or until someone other than him was proven guilty. He was refused permission to see his daughter, but she was all he could think of. He didn't care that he had to work hard every day with few showers and insufficient meals. He didn't care to think of escaping or taking care of himself. The only thing that mattered to him was that his daughter was safe and happy. But there was no way for him to know anymore, and there was nothing he could do about it. Harry continued sorting, plastic in one trash bag, any electronics in another, and glass in yet another. With each bag he filled, another laborer would take the bag to the appropriate factory, where each material would either be recycled or shredded and burned to ash. Sometimes, Harry would secretly stuff things into his drawstring bag, which he carried around with him. As Harry reached for a noise machine that was letting out a constant static noise, he heard rustling in a bag behind him. He froze, then turned to look at the bag, which was waiting to be tied up and taken to the factory. He stared at the bag to see if it would make the noise again, or if his mind was playing tricks on him. As soon as he gave up and went back to his work, he heard the noise again, and in the corner of his eye he could see that the bag was moving. He looked up to see another worker walking towards him to take it, but Harry was too curious as to what the bag contained to let the man take off with it. I'm actually not done with this bag yet. I accidentally, mixed in the plastic with some electronics, so, I need to resort it," Harry lied. The worker nodded his head understandingly and walked off to find more bags already filled to the brim. Harry turned again to inspect the bag for a moment, half expecting a rabid squirrel or poisonous snake to lunge at his face. He decided to open it anyway, so he slowly opened the black trash bag, and inside he discovered something he didn't expect. Inside there was a small, 3-legged dog. How it got there in the first place, he had no clue. But as he looked into the eyes of the furry creature, whose dirty and rugged appearance reminded him so much of himself, he didn't really care how he got there. Harry looked around to be sure no one was looking, and then slowly raised the dog from the bag and set him down in front of him. The dog laid down fearfully, silently admitting he was not fast enough to run away. Harry reached to pet him and fell in love immediately. Harry assumed the dog thought the same, because he crawled into Harry's lap and curled up like a threatened millipede. Harry once again felt like he had a purpose, and that was to protect this dog. After contemplating several names, Harry named the dog Jake. He did his best to hide Jake from being detected and took care of him. He occasionally fed him food he found in the trash piles and shared his meals. Jake saw Harry sorting and began helping, and he never once made a mistake. He was very clever, and he was good company. A few days later, when Harry left his sleeping quarters to start the day's work, he smiled happily as he approached his perch, expecting to see Jake. His heart sank as he rounded the corner and found nothing but trash. He fell into a sudden state of panic, but he reassured himself that Jake would return later. After several hours passed, Harry no longer felt assured. He began a search for the poor dog, hoping to find him soon without being caught. It took a while, but Harry finally found a little tail, which was wagging eagerly. It was peeking from a hole under the great stone wall surrounding the dump. "Jake, I was so worried. What are you doing?" Harry spoke to him as if he were a child that could reply. The little tail disappeared under the wall, and a few seconds later a little nose peeked out in its place. Jake finally managed to climb back through and greeted Harry boisterously. "What did you do, Jake? Did you dig a hole under the wall? You dug a hole under the wall. You found a way out. Thank you, Jake." Harry couldn't believe no one had tried digging under before, but he was grateful no one had, or else they may have found a way to fix it. Jake gave him a big slobbery kiss across the face, as if to say, "You're welcome." Harry knew he would not be able to fit through the hole Jake had dug, but thought he might if it were just a little bigger. "Jake," he began, "I need you to expand this hole. I need it to be bigger so I can fit. I'll come back tomorrow. Make it big enough so we can escape, and then I can find my daughter. Oh, Jake, you're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. So, can you do that? Can you?" "Oh, what am I saying? I'm talking to a dog." "Well, if you do understand me, then please do that for me, and wait for me on the other side." Jake wagged his tail and began digging again, but Harry was unsure if it was because he understood, or if he just got bored of listening and decided to resume playing. Harry spent the rest of the day plotting his escape. He knew he couldn't just crawl through the hole. There were security guards everywhere, and most were perched near the walls. He spent all night gathering materials and fixing the noise machine he had found days before. The next morning, despite the lack of sleep, he felt energized and excited to execute his plan. He went to the wall furthest away from the one where the hole was, and pulled the once broken noise machine out of his bag and set it next to the bumpy stone wall. He had preset it to sound as if someone were climbing over the wall, with slipping noises and everything. So he turned it on and ran off. He heard the noises getting softer and softer as he moved farther and farther away from it, but he knew it was only getting louder and louder, and soon one of the guards was bound to hear it. He hoped they would be convinced that someone was trying to escape. In truth, someone was trying to escape, but the goal of the machine was to mislead the guards as to how and where it was happening. Once Harry reached a good distance from his diversion, he stopped for a moment to recall the next step of his plan. He was to climb through the hole that Jake had hopefully made big enough. He did not know if he would find Jake on the other side, for although Jake was very smart, he could not assume any dog would have understood his command to meet him there. He started on his run again. He needed to reach the wall on the other side of the massive dump before the noise machine was discovered, if he was going to escape unnoticed. Just as he took a step, he heard a footstep apart from his own. He quickly threw his drawstring bag into the garbage pile and bent over to act as if he were sorting trash like he should be. The security guard rounded the corner, or, more so, the tall mound of garbage, and inspected the work of Harry. Harry felt the glare of the man's eyes burning his mind, as the sun was burning his skin. The guard finally decided that Harry wasn't up to anything, so he walked off in a hurry to find another innocent soul to inspect. As soon as he was out of sight, luckily he went in the opposite direction Harry needed to go. Harry grabbed his bag and ran once again, this time to his full ability, because he knew he had already lost valuable time. Eventually, he reached the wall and looked around to be sure no guards were around. He hurriedly shoved his small, yet bulky, bag through the narrow hole, which did seem to be bigger than it was before, and struggled to climb through it himself. As he emerged on the other side, he heard a distinct thump, 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 and smiled when he realized it was Jake thumping his tail against the ground, kindly waiting for Harry to pull himself through before smothering him with kisses. Harry greeted him back, but he soon remembered where he was and sprung up to make a run for it, with Jake not far behind. He soon heard the distinct alarm that warned of an escapee, and hoped they were after the noise machine instead of him. He made good distance before he heard the roaring engines of the patrol trucks behind him. He turned to see how far they were, and decided there was a pretty good distance. Then he noticed Jake was trailing way behind because of his lost leg. He instinctively ran back to rescue Jake, without even worrying about being caught himself. Harry swiftly swept him off the ground and turned back around abruptly. Harry was a fast runner, but the extra weight of Jake and the lack of sleep the night before slowed him down tremendously, and the trucks were gaining fast. The dump, along with its enormous castle, was surrounded by a big open field, and the field was surrounded by thick woods. Harry knew that if he could make it to the woods, the guards would have to run on foot, because the trucks would not fit between the trees. He still had to run across a portion of the field as big as the dump itself before reaching the woods, but he forced himself to try. Steadily, the trucks got closer and closer and closer. Finally, one truck managed to get ahead of him and turn into his path. Harry, unable to turn quickly enough, slid sideways into the truck and fell over with a loud thud and dropped Jake. Jake stood and raced under the truck, racing towards the woods and leaving Harry behind. Harry picked himself up and tried running around the truck, but two more trucks pulled up on either side, and one blocked him from behind. He was trapped. Each of the security guards stepped out of their cars, and one of them pinned Harry to the truck with his hands behind his back. He knew there would be a great punishment set upon him, but at least he tried. Just as he had given up all hope, he heard a howl, followed by small footsteps getting louder and louder. Jake? No, it sounded like more than 3 feet. It sounded like more than 40 feet. Harry looked up, and an elated smile spread across his face. He saw a way out. It was like a ray of sunshine showing him the way. He waited patiently for the security guards to realize what was happening, which didn't take long. Each of them turned pale when they looked up, and they all looked like they could pass out on the spot. The stampede of dogs, with Jake running along the side, since he was not as fast, made its way quickly toward the cage of trucks Harry was trapped in. The guards finally decided their own life was more important than the punishing of Harry's, so they hopped into their trucks and sped off as fast as they could. Harry thanked Jake when he approached, and noticed the other dogs seemed to understand the whole situation somehow. After catching his breath from his escapade, Harry thought through his next move. He was free, but he knew he must go into hiding, in case Madame Middleton decided to have him tracked down. Then he remembered his daughter. He knew where to find her, so he began his journey without a second thought. He managed to get the dogs to stay, but he knew he'd be able to find them when he returned. When Harry first arrived at the town, memories flooded back to him. As he drew nearer to the house where he hoped to find his daughter, he felt less and less sure she would be there. If she was, what would she do? She would be grown already. He might not even recognize her, and she might not recognize him. He went on, forcing those thoughts out of his mind. The day he'd been dreaming of for 5 years had finally arrived. He had to do everything he could to find his daughter. He slowly walked up the stairs of the little house. He raised his fist to the door in slow motion, paused, and knocked 3 times. No answer. Still nothing. He turned around, head drooping, hoping she still lived there but just wasn't home. Just as he stepped off the last step, he heard the creak of a door behind him. "Yes? Do you need something, sir?" came a soft and gentle voice. Harrison stopped in his tracks and stood fearfully for a few seconds before he finally turned around. There was a young woman standing in the doorway, holding a precious baby in her arms. Behind her, a handsome man came to see who was at the door. A tear crept its way down Harrison's cheek and dripped onto his neck. "Amelia," he whispered hoarsely. "Dad!" the woman cried.